So when we think about anarchy, it often comes up as kind of a joke. Um, but the question of why to allow political authority at all is a legitimate question. And anarchists do have reasons for their beliefs, and it's actually based on sort of a more optimistic notion of the idea of human, uh, let's say the nature of humans or human nature. So they reject both the right of governance, so the right that political authority has to govern us, and the belief in the fundamental self interestedness of human beings. And I think the second one is more interesting and more important for providing reasons why we might not think that we need political authority. So, anarchists like Peter Kropotkin argue that there's no essential human nature at all, and this sounds a lot like Sartre and some of the existentialists that we talked about. But he argues instead we're shaped by cultural and social forces and evolution as well. So things like how we have to produce food and how like farming and hunting, gathering, and all these things that require cooperation shape what kind of people that we are. So the fact that we're not lions who just pretty much can go out and kill our food immediately and just eat it and don't really need the structure of a community around us has shaped us into social creatures. And this is important for what he thinks human good is. So remember when we talked about morality, we talked about Aristotle's idea of what the good life is for humans. And anarchists share some of this idea in the idea that, look, we have been shaped by evolution and culture and so on to be social creatures. So the idea that we could prioritize individual good over collective good or the other way around doesn't really make sense because they're just basically the same thing. So what's good for the society is good for humans in general, is good for the individual, according to anarchists. So really, freedom for an individual taken apart from freedom of the community or collective freedom doesn't make a lot of sense for anarchists, because you cannot be free as an individual in a society that is not free and that doesn't have these kind of opportunities. So we really have to focus on making the society the best it can in order to make humans have the best life they can. So the divide between individual and society is just really doesn't exist for them. It's like you are a part of this society and the society is part of you, and you can't really separate that off and say, well, we have to prioritize individual freedoms and we can't over collective freedom. It's all kind of the same thing. So the way this is played out hasn't always been terribly successful. Many anarchists of the late 19th, early 20th century advocated something like communism and the collective ownership of the means of production. And this came out of the Marx idea that the workers needed to own the means of production rather than having this separate capitalist class to do that, in order for workers to achieve their best life for them individually and also collectively, and in order for them to have satisfaction with their work and to feel empowered by the work instead of sort of beaten down by the capitalists who are forcing them to work. So you can respect private property, but at the same time have public goods owned communally And most people agree with that in the sense that they don't really want individuals owning parks, for example. But the communists want to go further and say that the means of production is also a public good, and that should also be owned collectively and not individually. So there's levels of this. Like, some anarchists are going to say that we should go so far as to not have money and say that members of a collective society are not going to be motivated by individual gain, but they're going to be motivated by the concern for the collective, and that this personal satisfaction of labor is going to be enough, and they're not going to need this incentive of, hey, you'll make more money if you work harder. And Kropotkin didn't believe that an anarchist society would lead to what a lot of people might assume, that a lot of people would freeload or be lazy and not want to work because they could sort of just skate along based on everybody else's work. Because if there was, say, guaranteed minimum wage or something like that, or salary that everybody got, then nobody would work hard. He doesn't believe that. He thought that people would understand the benefits of the collective and pull their weight voluntarily because they saw the value of community. Maybe this is too optimistic, and that's one of the main criticisms of anarchy, besides the other obvious criticisms that you need some kind of authority to keep order in society. People also argue that it's going to turn into a society where nobody works hard, which to some extent did happen with communism, but that was for various other reasons as well, and not just the fact that people could count on having a minimum standard of living. There were other reasons why communism failed, and part of it was that they did not really achieve the Marxian ideal for various reasons.